Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for the small delay. We have a little technical problems, but I think we got them all fixed up and settled. And it's so good to have everybody here. Um, so let's start. Whoever misses that will have a recording that you can go back and check out. So, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our first ever webinar of the South Hebron Hills Watch. Determined to stay life in the South Hebron Hills. It will be available later as a recording. Hi for everybody joining on Facebook. Please post your questions at any time directly to me. You can see my name. You can post the questions directly to me. We will hold the conversation for an hour. And for those who want to stay later for about 30 minutes past the hour, you can have an opportunity to ask a question directly. I'll walk you through that as the format changes past the hour. We'll be posting links in the comments throughout the conversation, but you don't need to stress about it or clicking on them if you pay attention to the conversation. We'll be including many of them in the following email, in the follow-up email you'll be getting. My name is Gili Getz. I'll be your moderator today. I serve on the board of the American Friends of Combatants for Peace, Partners for Progressive Israel, as well as on J Street's New York Executive Committee. I'm an alumni of the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, 2017 delegation, which was a deeply transformative experience for me that included spending time in the South Hebron Hills. A little bit about what is the South Hebron Hill Watch. We are a group of Israeli Americans volunteering who are politically active in the U.S. In order to raise awareness about the struggle of the poor farming communities of Masfariata in the South Hebron Hills in Area C of the occupied West Bank. We want to focus and bring attention and raise awareness to how the occupation manifests itself specifically in controlling rural Palestinian communities living in Area C. This is only one part of a larger system that exists across the West Bank that has two separate sets of laws and two separate systems of rights. And there are efforts in other places, of course, like Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem and the Jordan Valley, to expel Palestinians from their homes as well. We would be focusing specifically on the communities in the South Hebron Hills, which is our aim. Our aim is to reach American audiences, leaders, lawmakers, the Jewish community by creating content that amplifies and helps tell the story of the daily brutal reality of Masferiata communities and what they're facing, and especially the urgency of confronting the systemic efforts to dispossess these communities from their lands in order to advance the ongoing de facto annexation of Area C. We also want the world to hear about the dignity and resilience of these communities in the face of this reality. So please follow us on Twitter and Facebook, South Hebron Hills Watch, and look out for the email we're going to send following this webinar, and a little bit more about how you can participate at the end. I want to give a little bit of a framing before we get going. The Palestinians living under occupation are citizens of no country and have no basic rights. We have seen dramatic, sharp increases in settler and state violence against these communities. It's part of a cruel and extremely efficient bureaucracy designed to help illegal settlements grow and develop while making the lives of Palestinians in the South Hebron Hills unbearable in order to force them to leave or expel them. These efforts include denying of almost all building permits and systematically demolishing homes, infrastructures, water supplies, shelters, roads, confiscation of farming lands, farming equipment and vehicles, while settlements right next door are supported and developed by the state. According to the Israeli government itself, in the last 5 years in Area C, only 33 building permits were given to Palestinians, while over 16,500 building permits were given to settlers. This policy is essentially making almost every structure illegal, and any effort of these communities to develop or even barely survive is illegal and subject to demolition and destruction. 797 demolition orders were issued by Israel last year, according to the Israeli Civil Rights Administration, while less than 1% of Palestinians' requests for construction permits in Area C were granted, less than 1%. The alarming surprise in settler violence with almost complete impunity not only causes severe injuries, property damage, and trauma to these communities, but also threatened the stability of the Israeli government and is aimed also at Israeli soldiers. Uh, um, Let me just find my place. Before we start, I'd like to mention our sponsors today. The first one being the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, CJNV. The current delegation of the Center for Jewish Nonviolence is right now on the ground. Hinenu, a 3-month sustained solidarity delegation in South Hebron Hills, working with Palestinian leaders on the ground. The CJNV community today is mourning the passing of Tom Marver, who took part in a number of delegations. We are deeply saddened by his passing. I just wanted to mention that. Our other sponsor is Combatants for Peace, a joint Israeli-Palestinian nonviolent resistant movement that has been leading a campaign for water access in these communities. The government policy includes severe water restrictions and infrastructure on the residents. The third sponsor is J Street, a pro-Israel, pro-peace advocacy organization that often takes its congressional delegations to see the South Hebron Hills communities, so members of Congress can get a real sense of the reality on the ground from a first-hand experience. It really matters. They see it for themselves. And secondly, before we start, I'd like to take a moment and honor the life and memory of Haj Sulman. You know, our group wakes up every day and sees photos and videos from the South Hebron Hills, from the demolitions, from the violence, the raids that happened the day before. And as we did today, and we'll touch about that in a moment about what happened today. But on January 5th, it was especially difficult. We got word that the iconic. Let me share my screen with you. That the iconic anti-occupation activist Haj Sulman from the village El Khair was run over by an Israeli police tow truck that dragged him and drove off, leaving him on the ground bleeding. Yet another instance of dehumanizing features of the occupation. When he was brought to the hospital in Hebron, the doctor said that Haj Sulman had fractured his skull, his chest, and had severe bleeding in the brain and abdominal. He struggled to stay alive and tragically died after 2 weeks. Haj arrived in El Khair after his family was displaced from the Negev, the Nakab, in 1948. Sulman was well known for his nonviolent civil disobedience, famously holding a Palestinian flag in front of Israeli bulldozers, destroying his home and the neighboring homes in neighboring villages. He did it with great courage and was facing armed soldiers and violent settlers, and became prominent Bedouin iconic icon of resistance, a symbol of nonviolent resistance and resilience against the occupation. On the day of his funeral, there's just some of the articles, a beautiful article by Ali Awad and Auda Thain that I really recommend you read. The day of his funeral, thousands mourned and marched in one of the largest gatherings in the South Hebron Hills. paying their respects to Haj Suleiman, and news of his death traveled way beyond the communities of Mastayata, and this is a tribute by a cartoonist, Custanini from Italy, who paid tribute, and Ali Valshi, who gave a very moving tribute on MSNBC. And we hold today this conversation in his memory. And may his memory be a blessing, and may he's rest in peace and rest in power. Now, for our guest today, for our special guest today, we are so excited and thankful for you making the time, Eid and Maya, to talk to us about this reality. I met Eid years ago in my first visit to Umm al-Khair with friends from the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. I went to document and see with my own eyes and have Eid explain to me the reality that they're facing. Even though I grew up 30 minutes away, I never knew about these struggles. I never knew about these communities and what they're going through. So, Eid, before this start, it's so good to see you. Maybe before we start talking about some of the history and some of the developments in the communities, maybe we can talk about what happened today. Because, like many days, this was another day of difficulty and hardship and demolitions. So maybe we can start with that and then go into a little bit of background about Umm al-Khair and other communities.
Thank you, dear Gilly, and thank you for everyone who is with us tonight, for everybody who entering the room now. I am I am Eid Hadalin. I am a photographer and artist who live in Umm al-Khair village in South Hebron Hills in the West Bank. And thank you for remembering for Haj Suleiman. Is very grateful. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank everybody who were writing about him and posting about him long this month after these 2 months after his passing away. I mean the general situation in Masafriata and South Hebron has never changed. It's getting more and more aggression. It's getting more and more harassment. It's getting more and more building, settlements everywhere and taking more lands from the Palestinians. And it's every day we see closing to the Palestinians from everywhere. And by the way, today the military came as usual. Wednesday, the bulldozers arrived to South Hebron Hills, to Masafriyat especially, and they began, a demolition process in She'ab al-Butum near Guawis, and they demolished a couple of buildings, living houses, and 4 of them. Then they left to Al Safer village, which not far away, but it's behind the wall, which is a Palestinian village, and they demolish also 2 living rooms and animal barn and all structure also. There is many demolition orders, by the way, in all the villages in Masafriyata and in the firing zone area especially, but we saw the demolitions going on in a weekly process nowadays. I mean, years ago, it happened maybe in 2 months or in a half year twice. But in these recent years, in these 2 recent years, after the pandemic of the corona, it's getting mostly every week sometimes. Sometimes it's twice in a week or 3 times in a month, especially in Masafriyat, which called Area C by the Israeli law. And that's caused the Palestinian people very much harassment, even though in the meantime, we saw development, the development in the settlements around is going on very well without stopping. We saw the building permission is going very smoothly to the settlers, but for the Palestinian, it is really very complicated process to have permission to build your home safely without fearing from the demolition tomorrow. That's caused the Palestinian twice to pay. For a planning zone, it's take them a lot to pay. For even though getting higher with the papers to the Israeli Supreme Court, it's also cost them a lot. Then, in the end of the day, the Supreme Court or the court decide to demolish these houses. Then we begin again and again in this circle, which never stop. I mean, the demolition process is the most expensive and harassed operation done against the Palestinian human beings who are living in these simple shelters, which barely save them from the cold and the heat weather sometimes in the summer. Even though it's not get the permission, there is a lot of excuses by the Israeli government to not giving a permission to those houses. Forbidding from planning zone, saying a closed military area, firing zone area, whatever. It's all happened in one place. And the two places, the settlement is very close to the Palestinian communities, by the way. It's getting all the development, it's getting all the infrastructure itself, but the Palestinian communities forbidden from that. This is the game which going on in Area C. As a Palestinian community who live in Area C, we saw this in a daily basis and daily life. The harassment and the demolition and the confiscation and arresting people in the night, raiding the villages in the night. It's happened in Atwani 1 week ago, and it's happened in Susia 2 days ago. They arresting a guy from Susia. They detained him because they suspicious he's attack a settler. Just suspicious. They took two guys from Atwani, arrest them whole day from the 3:30 in the morning. One old guy, 70 years old, and his nephew is 25 years old. And they detained them in the police station just 16 hours. Then they release them because there is no improvement that they do something they're supposed to be arrested about. This is the daily incidents happening in South Hebron Hills, especially. It's happened in all the West Bank, but we also, because we are people who live in South Hebron Hills, we saw it day by day happening here. And this is it in general. I mean, this is what happened every day.
Thank you, Eden, and we do see the incredible work of the group of activists in the South Hebron Hills and the documentation of these daily efforts to destroy infrastructure, destroy shelter, and make life really, really hard. I'd like to quote, before we go to Maya, Michael Sfard, one of the Israeli leading human rights lawyers, wrote that in these investigations, only not taking evidence from eyewitnesses and getting their statements, accepting suspects' alibis without verifying them, chronic failure to search suspects' home. So when there is a settler violence or when settlers complain about something, only they get heard by the system. Palestinians don't seem to get a fair shake by the system when there is some type of violence from settlers. Maya, so good to have you. If you can share with us your incredible journey, how did you get to the South Hebron Hills, and what it was like being there as an Israeli? If you can share your story, it's pretty remarkable.
Sure. Hi. Hello, Gili and Eid and everyone. So my name is Maya. I'm I'm an Arabic teacher and now a part of the group of activists working in the South Hebron Hills with Eid and the other Palestinian local activists that are working there daily. I got to the South Hebron Hills pretty recently, like a year and a half ago. We started a project, me and Noor, my partner in this project, of an intensive Arabic course for activists that a group that we brought to live in the South Hebron Hills for 3 months. Together with CJNV, we established the first group a year ago, and our goal, my personal goal, was to bring people to be on the ground, to see this reality and to learn Arabic, and try to leave the comfort zone that is so strong and very comfortable for Israelis in Israel that usually do not see the reality on the ground. And I think those facts that Gidi, you talked about, and that we hear now from Eid, the fact that 97% of requests to build a house in Area Cs are denied, the fact that there is no water or electricity, these are not dry facts when you live there and when you meet people and see people. So that was our goal when we started. So a year ago, we started with our first group. We were 10 activists coming to the South, and we pretty much joined the activists in their daily activity, accompanying shepherds, documenting demolitions, escorting kids from school that need to walk daily from their houses and back to their houses through a violent outpost. And our job was just to join and to document, sometimes to try to de-escalate, sometimes didn't work, and to try to use our privileges as Israelis in this place. Yeah, so that was pretty much what we did. I think the journey, it feels much more than a year since we started. I think being there has changed for every Israeli or international activist that came for a long period of time, changed the concept of what it means to think about this area, like to see it in your eyes. You expand, I think, what you know about activism, what you thought about it, and you understand much more maybe the saying that existence is resistance. In Arabic, there is a word for that. It's called sumud. And this sumud that people in the South are acting through every day, you can see it when people choose to stay in their houses even though they don't have water or electricity. You can see it in how they educate their kids for nonviolent resistance, but to still fight the occupation. You can see it when people are continuing going out to shepherding, even though settlers attack them while doing it. Our role, I think, right now, like what we are still studying in this year and a half, is to watch and learn from this sumud, from this patience, from this daily struggle, to try to understand how to use our privileges in it, and also to hopefully expand our identity in this. And I think this is as an Israeli, I think this is one of the things that personally I've been through, and the participants in our groups are going through all the time. What it means to be an Israeli in this space, a solidarity activist, and how learning Arabic is something that we use to expand this identity, to be a part of the space that we live in. And ironically, it's so different from all other Arabic programs, like studies that exist in 48. That are disconnected from the political reality, that are disconnected from the people that are actually speaking this language. So we are trying to do the opposite of that.
Thank you so much, Maya. And please keep sending the questions to me. And before we go back to Eid to dig a little deeper into this reality in the South Hebron Hills, Ben will play a video of one of the videos we made about South Hebron Hills. And after that, we'll go back to questions, a short video. And here it comes. Thank you, Ben. So, Eid, I'd like to dig in a little bit. We have questions in the chat. Folks want to know we've seen a really dramatic increase in settler violence in the last period. The question is, what do you attribute that to? And more specifically, what is the relationship of the community in this ecosystem of settlers, soldiers, and police? There's these three types of groups, and the dynamics between them, and the dynamics with the community. If you can help us understand a little bit how it works in Area C.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as we know, the IDF is making the most work for settler protection, and serving them 24 hours. In the meantime, even though the Israeli police, because it's Area C, it's all controlled by the Israeli government, police and force and civil. As a Palestinian, we need to deal with that without civil laws. I mean, we need to deal with military laws as a Palestinian civilians. In the meantime, the settler, civilians, they deal with them with with Israeli civil law. It's separate two systems for Palestinian and for the Israeli people who live in the area itself. Now, if any problem happened between settlers and Palestinians in a daily, I mean, every day, you saw the IDF come and the police came, and they stand with the settler side, even though they didn't ask the Palestinians what happened or hearing what happened, if they attacked by the settlers or not. Always the informations come from one side, that is the settlers, the IDF, ask them, they tell them what to do, and then the police also the same. Then what they do, they go and they not talking to the Palestinian people who've been attacked or whatever, they arresting anybody who stay in the closed military zone, then taking them to the custody to the police station for investigations for 5 hours, 1 day. It's not make any change. Then release them back with a fine. They pay fine, then they release them home. Mostly, many shepherds got arrested in the last time. Many Palestinian people who've been plowing their lands got arrested just because the settlers aimed that the Palestinian is coming illegally in this way, in place, or attack them. And then this is, I think it's an Israeli government policy that the military and the Israeli law enforcement power in the area need to serve one side, not the both. That's the settler side. It's happened every day in every place. You see the military just came and do one work, that protecting the settlers, protecting, their works and stuff, and arresting immediately the Palestinian if they are not, even though they are innocent and they didn't do nothing to the other side. This is a state policy by the government in Area C, which very clear to everybody, very clear to the international community, very clear to the Palestinian society also in Area A, but nothing changed from that. This is caused the Palestinian simple people every day to being arrested, to being paying fines for nothing, to being, attracted by the police and the army in a daily basis. This has happened every day in Area C. No law which make equal between both sides. The law is going to one side, that the settler is powerful, with the military help, with the police help, they do what they want, and they never been investigated or arrested or asking to why they do that, or why do this. This is what happened in a daily basis. As a Palestinian, we know that, and we believe in that the IDF and the law enforcement just serve one side, that is the Israeli settlers just. Yeah.
Thank you, Eid. And on top of that, obviously, there's more and more land that the settlers take under different pretenses. The military takes and prevents the grazing. I find it fascinating with the settler violence kept increasing, dramatic, sharp increase. There was a debate within the Israeli government itself between the Minister of Police and the Minister of Defense. What is the authority of the soldiers? Are they allowed to detain violent settlers or not? It was a cabinet drama. Even they were disagreeing. Of course, they have the authority, but they don't want to use it. Even they were disagreeing about the system that is so deeply unjust. Maya, we have a lot of questions about kind of how the Israeli society is processing this, and how the progressive in the government are processing this, and what is the way to reach them to do something about this continually escalating situation of expulsion and annexation.
I think for the Israeli society, it's very easy, and what I see around me is that people are ignoring it, they just don't hear about it, or deliberately don't want to hear about it and they ignore it. And it's just not a topic. It's barely a topic in the news. The fact that annexation de facto is happening, it's not something that is, it's not the subject of on people's mind. In the last year, settler violence is a topic that started to rise in the news and also in the Israeli Knesset. And people are asked to give answers and deal with the problem. This is also, I mean, there is a rise of settler violence in the last year, but it was also there before. Much of the news that talked about it was after this kind of violence happened, when Israelis were also on the scene and were being attacked. So it does get to the news when Israelis are being hurt, and it still doesn't get when Palestinians are witnessing and are going through violence. If it's not documented, so of course, like it never gets, no one believes it. So I think now there is an attempt to talk about it as extremist violence, as we have those violent kids or teenagers or crazy people that are doing these actions in the far mountains in the south or mountains in the north, but very far from us, and very extreme people. It is good that there are conversations of how the police should deal with it. I actually don't know if there on the ground there are results for this conversation, but it's important to remind ourselves and to learn that this is not an extremist. It's not only actions of people in the far right. It's also something that is helping the Israeli the Israeli system, the Israeli attempt to displace Palestinians from their land. The violence, the daily violence against shepherds in the South Hebron Hills and in the north of the West Bank stops shepherds from going out with their sheep, and then force them to sell their sheep, stop being shepherds, move to towns in area A, where the government wants them to be. These areas are much more concentrated, and it helps the strategy of maximum Palestinian and minimum land. So area C is a lot of land with not many Palestinians. And if you are violent enough, and if you have those extremists to do your job and to scare and hurt those residents in area C, it helps you to get to fulfill your goal. So yeah, these things go hand in hand, and we can talk about very extreme situations and events that were pogroms in villages next to Al-Khair, where Eid is from. Those events, if we talk about the connection between army and the military, settlers and the residents, those events were, no one was being accountable, was being accountable for. And when it happened, we also saw the army follow the settlers and help them actually to scare the Palestinians, throw stun grenades at them, and did not stop the violent actions.
Thank you, Maya. It was extraordinary that Channel 12, I believe, aired. We sent this link with the invitation. Aired a primetime magazine piece about the South Hebron Hills and the reality there, which was something the Israeli society doesn't talk much about. So that piece in prime time was really hard to watch about the brutality of this reality. We're gonna show one more short video from a raid on Basel's house. One of the other methods that the occupation is trying to not let this story go out is by harassing journalists, people who report, harassing activists. And as you can see in this video, this was a raid on probably the leading voice in journalism that we will link to in one of our links. I think it's coming. And this was a raid to confiscate photography equipment and computers, all done with no warrants and no due diligence. I think this is the video is being played now.
אנחנו רשאים להיכנס לפה, עבירה מסוג פשע, בסדר? אנחנו באים לפה, אנחנו תופסים את כל מה שקשור לאמצעי טכנולוגי. את מורכבת כרגע לצורך עדות בתחנת משטרה, בסדר? את צמודה אליי, לא זזה ממני. אם תסרבי לעיכוב, את תעצרי. בסדר? וסירוב לעיכוב. אתם לא יודעים שאני הטלפון הקטן? יש לנו את כל מה שאנחנו צריכים בתחנה. אם יש לך משהו שאת חושבת שאנחנו מתנהלים כראוי, את מוזמנת לפנות למח"ש.
לא, זה לא עובד ככה, אתם צריכים להראות לי צו.
אוקיי, בתחנה תראי את הכל.
לא, אני לא בתחנה, אתם לא לוקחים דברים בלי להראות לי צו.
קודם כל אני לוקח את כל מה שיש
אז
פה.
תראה לי צו.
אני לוקח את כל מה שיש פה, אני תופס את זה כראיה.
לא, אין לי שום דף. רשמתי אצלך בפתק, אני רוצה דף שכתוב את כל הרכוש של הקבוצה. מה זה צריך לראות?
Maya, maybe you can say a couple words about those moments and that incident. There were other efforts to fabricate lies about journalists who cover this. They were debunked, but in this particular instance, you were there at the house. Basel was out of the country, I think, at the time. Can you just say a couple words about what it's like to be in this type of interaction?
Sure. I think first of all, it's I didn't know you're gonna show this video, and when I talked about the pogrom in Mfagara, the village where 70 settlers ran into a village and hit a 4-year-old with a stone. It's important to go back to the quote you said about Ave Michael Sfard, and you can see how many forces came to Basel's house this night when no crime was made. We had three participants of the program were arrested for the night. I was detained for a few hours. I think I did not expect that. Like, really, there was no crime that was being made. But I think also it was it did feel like there was it was a new step to the attempt of the police to stop us. We didn't experience something like that before. Night raids and really illegal actions, like they just took stuff without a warrant. They didn't give us a list of what they're taking. I think I wasn't afraid in those moments. I was in other moments in the South and in the past year. There are also very scary moments, and in this one I wasn't so afraid. I think because I knew that the law is I'm just safe, and it is a very weird experience to have in a Palestinian village in Tuani, surrounded by people that the law is not protecting. So yeah, in this night I was taken to the police and to the police station in a police car, and I was pretty calm. I had an interrogation. I was released the same day. They wanted to give me an like distancing from the area for 14 days. They did. We appealed. They canceled it, and it is important to say, and Eid said it also. People are being arrested daily in the West Bank. They're being arrested with no crimes being held, and sometimes they are released in the same night. Sometimes they are released 4 days after. Sometimes they are not released for years, and almost always they have to pay very high fines. At this night, I'm happy that nothing else happened, that this is what happened. I don't know what would have happened if Basel wasn't out of the country. And yeah, I think it's just, I don't know, it's a very confusing, it's an absurd situation to be in. And at the same time, having all the people around me, including all the residents of the house that we are hosted in, being very familiar, and they know the situation. They saw it before. The members of their family were arrested in the middle of the night. It's something that I was the one that was my first time. But it's really a regular thing, and it's also amazing to see the community and how they are ready to fight together, like and to support each other. Like this fight and being together in it is the only support that these communities have. They have each other in those moments.
It's incredible when you visit the South Hebron Hills, the amount of privilege that Jews have compared to Palestinians in that region. The bureaucracy is very, very effective in depriving and arresting and destroying any Palestinian infrastructure or growth in an incredibly efficient way. Yet it can't deal with settler violence or illegal settlements at all. It seems completely incompetent as a part of a policy to do that. Edith, if we can, before we go to a direct conversation with those who want to stay and ask direct questions, there is this phenomena of agricultural outposts. So it's land that settlements take, where there's few people on it, but they take it for agricultural purposes. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that. You live in farming communities. You herd sheep and have lands that you use it for. And it seems that there's different types of methods to restrict you to smaller and smaller parts of the land you can use. Partially by the military take in Assam, and partially by these agricultural outposts that seem to be blocking more and more land, essentially annexing it de facto, limiting you to a smaller. So can you talk a little bit about that dynamic?
I mean, it's a policy began just in the time of the pandemic and after the deal of the century ideas, that Israel started a policy with building small farms, small barns in everywhere in a hilltop around the area C, and all the grazing land around, which compare one settler with in front of him 100 Palestinian shepherds. He controlled thousands of dunams and didn't let any Palestinian graze his animals again in that place. And then, I mean, there was a lot of, talks between the Palestinian owners of the land and the military and the ICA when they came to demonstrate against this kind of projects. Then the ICA say it is a state land. The state, rented to the settlers, and the settlers, as citizens, they, rented from the state. And then this is it. The idea here, the settler being supported with the military, with the government support and aid in 24, and instead of Palestinian people who live in Area C, side by side, forbidden from entering this grazing area as a shepherding in a daily basis or farmers. Sometimes there is a plowing land which is supposed to be plowed by the Palestinians, and it's very legal to plow it. In the beginning season of the plowing season in Palestine, the ICA confiscated more than 3 tractors from the and forbidden the Palestinians from plowing the land to prepare it for planting some barley or wheat. This has happened in the beginning of the season this year, and this land is just stopped from entering and deploy it, even though this policy began from the south. It's until the Jordan Valley, also in Nablus area, in the middle, in East Jerusalem, in the beside Jericho, also in Masafariata. It's very much farm we saw nowadays. In every hilltop, you see a small barn with 100 flocks of one settler. You see a group of settlers, grazing these flocks, and sometimes they, in a purpose, they get it and mix it with the Palestinian flocks. Then when it's mixed, they call the police and the military, and then the military came and just start to separate these both people from each other. Then the Palestinian being arrested at the end of the day because the settlers aim that the Palestinian get in their private property. This is what happened. This policy, by the way, Israel, when they do it, since 2 years ago, they confiscated thousands of dunams and land from Masafariat, especially, and in whole area C from the south until Jordan Valley. This is very good policy for them. It's work. It is very smooth, and it is not cost them very much. It's not cost them much money to pay. The state give the land to the settler, and then forbidden the Palestinian farmers to entering their land or plow it or graze their sheep there. That's cost the Palestinian people a lot of money to pay to the traders who bring in food for the animals. Then, in the end of the day, the Palestinian farmer find himself with a lot of debate of money, and he's supposed to pay this money back to the traders in the market. And then, in the end of the day, he saw himself selling his sheep one by one. In terms of 500 flocks, he will got 50 or 60 in the end of the day. And the Palestinian farmers arrested in Area C, always with a lot of paying money, paying a lot of money to the police, money to the traders, and money to bring food to the animals and water. That's cost them more and more. And then they find themselves broken and sell everything and just staying home without do nothing. This is very highly technique from the government of Israel to forbidden the Palestinian farmers from using their land in Area C in these years. If it's continuous in the future, we will didn't see any shepherds or farmers working in their land anymore.
And another reason that's effective is you need very few people to have a farming outpost. You don't need to bring settlers in big numbers. You just need a few, and you can grab with the obviously support of the Israeli government. You can grab big swaths of land. So before we move into our next section, let me just point out to and I'll share my screen, to some of the work being done on the ground to support these communities and these activists by Israelis. And here we have Combatants for Peace in their water campaign, trying to deliver water to these communities that are being deprived of water. They get very little fraction of what the settlers get, and if they even build a pipe, the pipe's being cut. So this is an effort to bring water. Activists were beaten, even Israelis were beaten, trying to deliver that water. Right now, it's a photo we got from the South Hebron Hills. This is the Hinenu delegation of diaspora Jews who will stay there and walk the shepherds and try to put their bodies to protect as much as possible these communities. And this is a great photo from Susia, two great members of Congress visiting with J Street. I'll also say that in this letter sent to Defense Minister to stop settler violence that we know is coming, are signed by a group of anti-occupation ecosystem of Israeli groups who are fighting very hard to try to change the reality on the ground, standing together, Combatants for Peace, J Street Israel, Peace Now, Breaking the Silence, Yesh Din, Rabbis for Human Rights, who are doing incredible work every day on the ground, Mothers Against Violence, and others. These are Israeli organizations fighting on the ground as much as possible. And now, let me just, before we end and move to our next section, let me also just specifically thank Shula, Ben, Beth, Michal for your really hard work on this webinar, and South Hebron Hills. Just wanted to shout out and thank you so much. Our sponsors do have asks that we'll put in the chat and send in the emails. Follow the Hinenu of CJNV, join the water campaign of Combatants for Peace, and the joint memorial ceremony, joint Israeli-Palestinian memorial ceremony, and joint Nakba Day. Keep an eye for those. Those are extraordinary events for activist community on the ground. And J Street has both a petition to the Secretary of State to pressure Israel to stop settler violence, do more, do what's needed to stop this horror, as well as a conference coming up. So keep an eye for that too. Okay, so now we're gonna change the format and allow folks to ask questions. So if you, and I didn't get to a lot of questions, a lot of things people want to know about how to help, how to make this better, how to communicate to people in power about this. And before we go there, we'll show a short video of Combatants for Peace Waters campaign. And then we'll move to the conversation. It's about a minute long. And Ben has it right here about this water campaign image.